Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on something that affects every single one of us, but in a way that, well, it's almost invisible. We're talking about the dark game of currency.
It's a game that's been played for thousands of years.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really trace that history, that pattern of what's called currency debasement. We'll go from, ancient Rome all the way to the modern Federal Reserve.
And then we'll connect it to right now, because the current system, the fiat system, it's reaching its mathematical end. So we need to look at what comes next. The three big contenders: gold, CBDCs, and of course, Bitcoin.
Right. And for you, the listener, it's so important to get that this isn't some new crisis that just popped up.
Oh, it's a cycle. It's predictable. I mean, when a Roman emperor was shaving a little bit of silver off a coin, that's the exact same act, fundamentally, as a central banker today typing zeros into a computer.
It's the same strategy, just a different technology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The medium changes, but the theft is identical.
Okay, so let's define the one term that really ties all of this together. Our sources kept bringing up this Hindi word, milliwatt. Can you unpack that for us?
Milliwatt. It's a fantastic word for this. The literal translation is something like adulteration or corruption. But in this context, it's so much deeper.
It's not just about a little bit of corruption.
No, it's the perfect lens because it describes the moral hazard of having centralized control over money. Back in the day, milliwatt was physical. You'd take a pure gold coin, you'd melt it down, mix in some cheap copper, and then you'd restamp it as if it were still pure.
So the government gets a real asset, the pure metal, and gives back a diluted one, and they just pocket the difference.
I pocket the difference. It's institutional theft by dilution. The number of coins goes up so the king can pay his army, but the actual value in the system, it shrinks.
And now we have what you call digital milliwatt.
That's the insidious genius of the modern system. We don't need a furnace. When you hear about quantitative easing or the Fed buying bonds,
Right.
that's just typing zeros on a ledger. They're increasing the supply of dollars without any corresponding increase in real-world value, in goods and services. And that silently dilutes the purchasing power of every single dollar that you've saved. It's the same theft.
Which brings us right to the core question from our listener that started this whole thing. You look at the national debt, it's pushing $38 trillion. It's a number that's hard to even comprehend.
It's an abstract number to most people.
And you realize the dollar is backed by, well, nothing, a promise. So the question is, if the math doesn't work anymore, what happens to our savings? And more to the point, how do we survive the reset that has to come? That's the blueprint we want to build today.
Let's do it.
So to really understand how fragile our digital money is today, we have to go way, way back, like 200,000 years back. Why did we even invent money in the first place? Why not just stick with bartering?
It really comes down to this core survival truth, which is that self-sufficiency is poverty.
Right. The idea that one person can do everything they need to survive it's a myth.
It's a complete myth. Think about it in a tribal setting. Hunting is incredibly dangerous. Making effective tools is a highly specialized skill. Farming is a full-time job. So trade, just sharing your meat for someone else's tools, that was the first and maybe the most important social technology we ever invented.
And from there, you get what economists call comparative advantage, this idea that specialization creates a wealth explosion.
Absolutely. It's where 1 + 1 = 3. If you let the best hunter hunt and the best tool maker make tools, the entire tribe becomes exponentially wealthier. You get a surplus.
But humans aren't like other animals. We don't just want to survive today. We want to store that surplus for tomorrow.
That's the key driver. We want security. We want to be able to save our effort, our labor for the future. We want to retire. Money, at its heart, was invented to be a battery, a way to store your time and your energy.
Okay, so the first attempt at this was barter, phase 1. And it lasted for an incredibly long time, nearly 200,000 years. So why did it completely fall apart once we started building bigger civilizations?
Well, it only works in a very small, very high-trust environment,
Oh.
like a small tribe where you know everyone, you know what they have, you know what they need. The moment you scale that up to, say, a city market filled with strangers, barter just dies. It's killed by 3 fatal flaws.
And the first one is the one everyone learns about in school. The double coincidence of wants.
And it sounds academic, but think about the sheer inefficiency. Let's say you're a farmer with a sack of grain, and what you really need is a new axe head.
Okay.
You have to find an axe maker. Simple enough. But what if he doesn't want grain? What if he wants leather hides? Well, now your job isn't farming anymore. Your job is running around the market trying to find a tanner who has hides and just so happens to want grain.
It's a logistical nightmare.
It paralyzes an economy. You can't build a complex society if 80% of your energy is just spent trying to make trades.
Then you have the second flaw, which you call the cow dilemma, the indivisibility
All
problem.
right, this is all about liquidity.
Yeah.
Your wealth might be tied up in one very large, very valuable asset, let's say a cow. But what you need today is small stuff, a pair of sandals,
Oh.
a little bit of salt. You can't cut off a leg of the cow to pay for the sandals. You'd destroy most of its value. So you're asset rich with the cow, but you're cash poor. You have no flexibility for small transactions.
And the third flaw is the one that really brings us back to today's crisis, the storage problem, or as our sources call it, the rot.
If the whole point of money is to be a battery for your labor, that battery has to be durable. It can't leak. If you spend an entire season growing a massive harvest of grain and then it rots or gets eaten by rats,
Your savings, your stored labor just vanishes.
it vanishes. The medium itself was unreliable. Livestock dies, food spoils. This created this desperate multi-millennia search for something that could resist biology, something that could defeat time.
So that search leads us out of barter and into phase two, commodity money. We needed some kind of universal middleman, an item that had its own use, its own intrinsic value.
Exactly. And we tried everything. Salt was so valuable for preserving food that the Roman word for it, salarium, gave us our word salary.
And cattle, in Latin, pecus, that's where I get the word pecuniary.
Right. But maybe the best example of how this could go wrong is the story of the cowrie shell.
The cowrie collapse. This is so important because it teaches the lesson that scarcity has to be universal. It can't just be local.
For thousands of years, cowrie shells worked as money across huge parts of Africa and Asia. They were durable, they were easy to carry, and crucially, they were locally scarce. It was hard to find a lot of them.
But the fatal flaw was their source.
The fatal flaw was the Maldives. On the beaches of the Maldives, these shells were everywhere. They were worthless. You could just pick them up. So to a Maldivian, they were just pretty rocks. To a West African trader, they were a store of wealth.
And of course, European traders eventually figured out this arbitrage opportunity.
And they exploited it ruthlessly. This was, you could say, the first great colonial heist. It was the first time an external force caused mass inflation through a supply shock.
So they would just fill their ships with these shells.
For free. They'd fill the hulls of their ships with millions of cowrie shells from the Maldives, sail over to Africa, and just flood the market with this infinite new supply of money.
Destroying the savings of everyone who used it.
Instantly. They were creating real, valuable assets, gold, palm oil, people, for something that the Europeans had acquired for literally no cost. The lesson was brutal. Your money has to be scarce everywhere on Earth, not just in your backyard.
So after that failure, we shifted from trusting biology, things that rot and die, to trusting physics, things that are permanent. Which brings us to phase three, metal coins.
The scientific choice. It was really a process of elimination, using the periodic table of elements. We needed something that was rare, but not too rare, durable, divisible, and hard to fake.
Let's walk through that chemistry test. Why did gold and silver win out over the other 116 elements?
Well, first, you can eliminate the obvious ones. You can't make money out of a gas like oxygen or a liquid like mercury.
Too hard to contain.
Right. Then you eliminate anything that's toxic, like lead or arsenic, or anything that's highly reactive, like sodium, which literally explodes on contact with water.
Probably not good for your pockets.
Probably not. Then you get rid of anything that corrodes or rusts easily. So iron is out. Money has to last for centuries, not just a few years.
And what you're left with are the so-called noble metals.
The noble metals,
Yeah.
gold, silver, platinum, palladium. They're called noble because they resist corrosion and oxidation. They're stable.
But even then, platinum was a non-starter for ancient civilizations.
Its melting point is just too high, over 1,700 degrees Celsius. Ancient technology couldn't reliably melt it down, verify its purity, or stamp it into coins. Gold, on the other hand, melts at a much more manageable 1,064 degrees.
And it had other unique properties.
It's uniquely yellow, so you can't mistake it. It's incredibly dense, which makes it very hard to fake by mixing in a lighter metal. And it's malleable, easy to stamp with a king's face. It was the perfect elemental money that Earth had to offer.
But an economy can't run on just gold, right? It's too valuable for everyday purchases.
Exactly. Gold became the savings account, the national treasury. It was for storing large amounts of wealth over long periods of time. For daily life, you needed silver,
The small change.
the small change. Historically, for every 1 ounce of gold you find in the Earth's crust, you find about 15 ounces of silver. So that 1:15 ratio became the natural exchange rate. Silver tarnishes, so it's not quite as perfect as gold, but it was common enough that you could use it to buy bread or a pair of shoes. You need both.
And of course, the moment this near-perfect system is established, the temptation for milliwatt, for debasement, comes right back in. The Roman denarius is the classic example of this. It's the historical blueprint for how a currency dies.
It's a perfect case study. The fall of Rome wasn't just about barbarians at the gates. It was about fiscal rot from within.
It started with their finances.
It always does. When the emperors needed more money than they had to fund their massive armies or their lavish lifestyles, they couldn't just tax people more. So they looked at the money itself. Under Augustus, the denarius was basically pure silver, about 98%.
But that didn't last.
No, the pressure to spend was too great. So they started small, hoping no one would notice. By 60 AD, it was down to 90% silver, then 80. They were melting the coins down, adding copper, and reissuing them at the same face value.
And eventually people did notice.
Of course. The merchants, the soldiers, they're not stupid. They started weighing the coins or just refusing to accept the newer, lighter ones. You get Gresham's law in action. The bad money drives the good money out of circulation. People would hoard the old, pure silver coins and only spend the new, debased ones.
Which just paralyzes trade.
It grinds it to a halt. By the time of Emperor Gallienus, around 260 AD, the so-called silver denarius was a joke. It was a bronze coin with a thin silver wash, maybe 5% silver. And that collapse of trust in the money itself is what fueled hyperinflation. It destroyed the economy and was a massive, systemic reason for the ultimate fall of the Western Roman Empire. The cycle is always the same. Fiscal irresponsibility leads to milliwatt, which destroys trust and leads to collapse.
That lesson is so clear. If the state has control of the money, it will eventually abuse that control. But physical coins did have one major drawback in a growing world. They were heavy.
Yeah.
And they were dangerous to transport.
Right. Imagine you're a merchant in the Middle Ages and you need to close a huge deal 100 miles away.
Oh,
Are you really going to load up a wagon with a ton of gold and drag it down roads filled with bandits?
Not a great idea.
Not a great idea. So this vulnerability, this inconvenience, is what led directly to phase 4, the paper receipt. And this became the ultimate convenience trap.
The solution was the goldsmith.
The goldsmiths had the strongest vaults. They were the only ones who could securely store large amounts of metal. So merchants started leaving their gold with a trusted goldsmith and taking a paper receipt instead.
And the receipt would say something like, pay the bearer, on demand, 1 ounce of gold.
Exactly. And pretty soon people realized it was much easier and safer to just trade the paper receipts themselves rather than going back to the goldsmith, getting the physical gold, and then giving it to the other person. The paper became the money.
But it was backed 1-to-1 by the gold in the vault, at least in theory.
In theory. But this is where the dark game, the milliwatt instinct, comes roaring back. The goldsmiths, who are now acting like the first bankers, they noticed something.
That people rarely came to get their gold.
Very rarely. Most of the gold just sat there day after day. So they had a thought, a very tempting thought. What if we write receipts for gold that we don't actually have in the vault?
This is the birth of fractional reserve banking.
This is it. They might have 100 ounces of real gold, but they'd issue paper receipts for 500 ounces, lending out the 400 ghost ounces at interest and getting rich. They were creating money out of thin air.
Which works fine until it doesn't, until there's a rumor that the goldsmith cheated.
And then you get a bank run. Everyone rushes to the vault at the same time to get their gold. The goldsmith can't pay. The system collapses into chaos, and people lose everything.
And that chaos was the perfect excuse for governments to step in and say, we need to regulate this. We need to centralize it for stability.
It was the perfect pretext. This led to central banking and, in the United States, eventually to the Great Betrayal of 1933.
Executive Order 6102.
Signed by FDR, right in the depths of the Great Depression. The U.S. government made it illegal for American citizens to own gold coins, gold bullion, or even gold certificates.
They forced people to turn in their gold.
They forced them, under threat of a 10-year prison sentence. You had to take your family's savings, your life raft, and sell it to the Federal Reserve.
And the official story was this was needed to fight deflation and stabilize the economy. But the mechanism was it was pure theft.
It was stunningly cynical. The government made everyone sell their gold at the official price of $20.67 an ounce. Then, the moment the vaults were full of the public's gold, they slammed the door shut. and immediately revalued gold to $35 an ounce.
That's a roughly 40% theft of purchasing power overnight.
An overnight seizure of wealth. It was a critical move because it took the power away from the citizen. You could no longer vote with your feet by abandoning the paper dollar for real money. The government now had a monopoly.
But even after that, the global system wasn't totally unchained. We had the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, which kind of put golden handcuffs on the U.S. government.
It did. The deal was this. The U.S. dollar would be the world's reserve currency, and it would be pegged to gold at that new $35 an ounce price. So, while American citizens couldn't get gold for their dollars, foreign central banks could.
Which forced the U.S. to be fiscally responsible.
It was an external anchor. If the U.S. printed too many dollars, other countries would get nervous and start showing up to trade their dollars for our gold, draining our reserves. It kept them honest. For a while.
Until the 1960s, with the Vietnam War and the Great Society programs.
This spending just went into overdrive. They were printing money hand over fist to pay for guns and butter, and other countries noticed.
Right. I've read about Charles de Gaulle in France. He saw what was happening.
De Gaulle was smart. He knew the U.S. didn't have enough gold to back all the dollars they were sending overseas. So he famously sent a French battleship to New York Harbor and said, "We're here to exchange our dollars for your gold, as promised."
The French raid.
That raid kicked off a global run on U.S. gold. The vaults were emptying out fast, and it forced a crisis.
Which brings us to the final break, Phase 5, the Nixon shock, August 15th, 1971.
That was the day. Nixon went on television and announced he was unilaterally closing the gold window. He was officially ending the dollar's convertibility to gold. It was a default on the Bretton Woods promise to the entire world.
And that was the birth of the modern age of fiat money.
Fiat. It's Latin, let it be done. By decree. Fiat money is money that has value simply because the government says it does. It's backed by nothing but that government's promise, and more importantly, its power to tax you.
The power to demand you pay your taxes in their currency?
Exactly. And you cannot overstate the importance of this moment. Once that physical restraint of gold was gone, the psychological restraint on the politicians just re-evaporated. There was no limit anymore. That single act is why we've seen this exponential explosion of debt and money printing for the last 50 years.
Okay, so that brings us today, late 2025. This historical pattern of milliwatt has gone fully digital, and the central problem now is this $38 trillion U.S. debt trap.
And it's so important for people to understand that this debt isn't just some number on a government spreadsheet. It is the money supply.
Can you explain that? How is debt the money?
The way new dollars are created primarily is through debt. When the government needs to spend money it doesn't have, the Treasury issues a bond, which is just an IOU. The Federal Reserve then buys that bond. But they don't use existing money. They just credit the Treasury's bank account. They type new digital zeros into existence. So, new money equals new debt. The system requires ever-increasing debt just to function.
And that system has now created a death spiral, a vicious cycle, because interest rates are no longer zero.
The free lunch is over. For a decade, they could borrow for free. Now, with rates up, the cost of servicing that $38 trillion debt has exploded. We are now spending about $1 trillion a year just on interest payments.
$1 trillion that produces nothing.
Nothing. And to put that in perspective, that is more money than the entire U.S. military and defense budget combined.
That's the definition of an unsustainable path.
It's the definition of a sovereign debt spiral. They now have to borrow new money just to make the interest payments on the old money. It's a Ponzi scheme, and it's mathematically guaranteed to fail.
And this traps the Federal Reserve, doesn't it? They can't raise rates to really fight inflation because that would bankrupt the government.
They are completely cornered. If they were truly independent, they'd jack rates up to 8–10% to kill inflation. But they can't. They know that would double the interest payments overnight and trigger an immediate default. So they are forced, politically, to keep printing, to keep up the digital milliwatt.
So, given this trap, what are the endings? Our sources lay out two options, basically a choice of poison.
And only one of them is politically survivable. Option A is the hard default, the honest crash. The government just admits we can't pay, the debt is canceled.
What's the probability of that?
Zero. Absolute zero. Because the moment they do that, every bank, every pension fund, every foreign government holding U.S. bonds, which is the bedrock of the global financial system, goes bankrupt instantly. It's Armageddon. No politician will ever push that button.
So that leaves option B, the soft default. The inflationary route.
The 100% certainty. This is how every fiat currency in history has died. The government says, oh, don't worry, we'll pay back every single dollar we owe you. And then they print the trillions of dollars needed to do it.
So you get your money back, but it's worthless.
It's worth a fraction of what it was. This is the hidden tax. Inflation isn't just prices going up, it's the value of your savings going down. It's the government stealing from you slowly, instead of all at once.
Okay, let's map this out for the listener. There's a historical roadmap for this kind of collapse. 4 distinct stages of currency death. Where are we right now?
We are solidly in stage 3, and we are accelerating towards stage 4. This pattern is as old as the hills.
Stage 1 was the free lunch.
That was basically the decade after the 2008 crisis, from '09 to around 2020. The Fed was printing, doing QE, but all that new money got stuck in the financial system.
It didn't leak into the real economy.
Right. It just inflated asset prices. Stocks, bonds, real estate, crypto. It made the rich feel richer, but the price of milk and bread stayed pretty stable. Everyone thought they'd found a magic money tree.
Then came stage 2, the inflation spike.
Post-2020. The pandemic spending, the supply chain chaos, that was the catalyst. All that printed money finally burst out of Wall Street and flooded Main Street. And suddenly everyone felt it. Gas, groceries, rent, everything went vertical.
Which forced the Fed to raise interest rates, and that brings us to where we are now, stage 3.
Stage 3. The interest death spiral. This is the point of no return. The rates are up, so the interest on the national debt explodes. And the signal that you've crossed the Rubicon is when interest payments become larger than a major budget item like defense.
Which is exactly where we are.
Exactly. You're now borrowing just to pay the interest. The spiral is locked in. The only way out would be massive government spending cuts, austerity, and no politician will vote for an immediate, brutal recession.
So that leads, inevitably, to stage 4, the crack-up boom.
This is the final psychological phase. Historically, it happens about 18 to 36 months after stage 3 gets locked in. This is when the general public, not just the economists, but everybody realizes the government can't stop printing. They lose all faith in the currency as a store of value.
So they start spending money as fast as they can get it.
Instantly. Why save a dollar that will be worth 10% less next month? You buy anything tangible, a can of beans, a new tool, a hard asset. That frantic spending is what's called an increase in the velocity of money, and that's the final trigger for hyperinflation.
So instead of just watching the calendar, we need to watch for specific triggers. The sources identified 3 key signals that we're entering that final phase.
Right. Trigger number 1 is something called a no-bid bond auction.
Explain that.
So normally, when the U.S. government needs to borrow money, it sells its debt treasury bonds at an auction. And the buyers are big institutions, foreign countries like Japan and China, pension funds.
They lend us the money we need to operate.
Yes. But when those buyers lose faith in the dollar's future, they stop showing up to the auction. They stop buying our debt. That's a failed option, a no bid.
And if nobody else will buy the debt, who's the buyer of last resort?
The Federal Reserve. They're forced to step in and print the money to buy 100% of the government's new debt. That is the ultimate red flag. It's the moment the U.S. can no longer borrow from the world and is forced to openly and catastrophically print its own money.
Trigger number 2 is a very specific number, the 40% revenue red line.
This comes from studying every major currency collapse in modern history. The point of no return is when the government's annual interest payments eat up 40% of its total annual tax revenue.
And where are we now?
We're hovering between 20 and 25%.
So halfway there.
We're halfway to the historical guarantee of hyperinflation. If rates stay where they are or go up, we hit that 40% line in the next 2 to 3 years. That puts the 2027 to 2029 window squarely in the danger zone.
And the third trigger is something that's happening right now, behind the scenes, ghost gold buying.
This is what the central banks are doing, not what they're saying. For the last couple of years, central banks around the world have been buying physical gold at the fastest pace in history. That's a clear sign they're diversifying away from the dollar.
But the ghost part is what's really telling.
Yes. The key detail is that something like 2/3 of all that buying is unreported. It's not being declared to institutions like the IMF. They're buying it quietly through intermediaries because they don't want to cause a panic and crash the dollar before they've finished building their own lifeboats. They know what's coming.
So the system is essentially a zombie. It's already dead. It just doesn't know it yet. The final reset happens when one of these triggers makes the public realize the printing is permanent.
Absolutely. The official inflation numbers are a fantasy. The real milliwatt, the real rate of dilution of your savings, is probably closer to 7 to 10% a year. The clock is ticking.
Okay, so if the collapse is a mathematical certainty, we have to shift our focus. It's not about if, it's about what comes next. This is the great wealth transfer, wealth moving from paper holders to asset holders.
Violently moving. And as the old system dies, there are three new systems, three tiers racing to replace it. And you really need to understand which tier you're going to end up in.
Let's start with Tier 1, the government solution, the state cage, central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs.
The sales pitch for this is going to be brilliant. They'll tell you it's safe, it's efficient, it's a digital dollar that protects you from bank failures.
But the reality is much darker.
The reality is that a CBDC is not money. It's a surveillance voucher. It's fundamentally different from the digital money in your bank account today. A CBDC is a direct liability of the central bank. It gives them total, real-time, programmable control over your life.
Let's break down what programmable actually means. These features are terrifying.
Okay, first, expiration dates. They can literally program your money to disappear if you don't spend it by a certain date. This kills savings and lets them force economic activity whenever they want.
Second, restricted purchases.
They can tie your money to social goals. Imagine trying to buy gasoline, but your carbon credit allowance for the month is used up, so the transaction is denied. Or trying to buy more than a certain amount of red meat. It's direct social engineering through your wallet.
And third, and maybe the worst, is the end of privacy and the potential for political control.
Cash is private. A CBDC is the opposite. Every single transaction you ever make is recorded on a central ledger. And if they decide they don't like your politics or what you said online, they have a button they can press that just switches off your ability to transact. It freezes you out of the economy. It's absolute control.
So Tier 1 is the default for most people, centralized control. But there's a Tier 2 emerging in opposition to that, the de-dollarization movement, the BRICS plus trade unit.
Right. These are the countries that actually make things, energy, commodities, manufactured goods. And they are sick and tired of trading real stuff for U.S. paper IOUs that are constantly being devalued.
So they're building their own system.
They're building a parallel system. It's not about replacing the dollar with the Chinese yuan. It's about creating a neutral settlement asset for international trade. And it will be backed by a basket of real things: gold, oil, wheat, copper.
So this isn't a currency for people, it's a currency for nations to trade with each other.
Precisely. You won't use it to buy coffee. But it will allow Brazil to sell soybeans to China without ever touching the US dollar or the SWIFT system. The world is splitting in two: a debt-based consumption economy in the West and a commodity-backed production economy in the East.
Which brings us to Tier 3, the lifeboats for the individual, the vault. This is where gold, silver, and Bitcoin come in.
This is how individuals can opt out of the failing system.
Mm.
Gold and silver are reassuming their historical role as the ultimate stores of value. Their prices will have to be revalued dramatically higher to reflect all the currency that's been printed against their fixed supply.
And there's a really interesting argument being made that in this cycle, silver might be the new gold. Why is that?
It's two things coming together. First, its industrial utility is exploding. You cannot build a green energy future without silver. It is essential for solar panels, for electric vehicles, for 5G, and most of the silver used in industry is consumed. It's gone forever.
Right.
So demand is skyrocketing while supply is fixed.
And the second factor is its price relative to gold.
The historical gold to silver ratio was about 15 to 1. It took 15 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. Today, it's around 80 to 1.
A huge deviation.
A massive historical anomaly. It suggests that silver is incredibly undervalued compared to gold. So gold gives you that guaranteed wealth preservation. Silver offers that same preservation, but with this added explosive upside potential as that ratio reverts to the mean.
And then we have the new player on the block, Bitcoin. Why is it being called digital gold?
Because it's the first thing we've ever invented that uses mathematics and energy to perfectly replicate and in some ways improve upon the properties of gold.
So it has that absolute scarcity.
Absolute mathematical scarcity.
Yeah.
There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. No central authority, no government can ever change that number. It can't be debased. It gets its integrity not from a vault, but from something called proof of work.
Yeah.
It costs real-world energy to create and secure the network, and you can't fake that.
And it solves some of gold's biggest problems, like portability and seizure.
That's its killer app. It is perfectly portable and almost impossible to seize. You can hold $1 billion of value in your head as a 12-word password. You can walk across any border with your entire net worth and no one can know it or take it from you. That's something gold could never do.
What about tokenized gold? The idea of a digital token that represents physical gold in a vault somewhere. Is that a safe Tier 3 asset?
It's a fantastic convenience layer. It makes gold easy to trade. But you have to understand it has what's called counterparty risk.
Meaning you're trusting someone else?
You're trusting the company that runs the vault. You're trusting the government of the country where that vault is located. If that government decides to do another 1933-style confiscation, your digital token, which is just a claim on that physical gold, becomes worthless overnight. Bitcoin has no counterparty. There's no vault to raid. That's the revolutionary difference.
Okay, we've laid out the problem and the future systems. Now for the most important part, the personal survival blueprint. We have to start by learning from past collapses.
And you have to understand that digital confiscation is real and it is easy. Look at Cyprus in 2013. The government was broke, the banks were failing. So they passed a law, and overnight, they simply stole 47.5% of all bank savings over 100,000 euros. It was legal, it was instant, and it was theft.
It proves that if your money's in a bank, you don't really own it. You're an unsecured creditor.
You are. And the 1933 gold seizure proved that they will come for hard assets too. So will they try to seize gold and silver again? Probably. But history shows us how to mitigate that. They always go after the big, obvious stuff first. Large investment-grade bars and vaults and safe deposit boxes.
They're less likely to go door to door for jewelry.
Much less likely. Small, fractional pieces, jewelry, items with cultural or personal significance, those have historically been safer.
And again, this is where Bitcoin's invisibility becomes its ultimate defense.
You cannot seize what you cannot find. A 12-word phrase memorized in your head is the ultimate in confiscation resistance. So a truly robust strategy means diversifying across all three. Physical metal you can hold, industrial metal with upside, and unseizable digital property.
This reset won't just be financial, it's going to be a great filter for the job market. This whole era of easy money has propped up a lot of jobs and companies that aren't actually viable.
We have an employment bubble, absolutely. The first things to go will be the zombie companies. These are businesses that don't actually make a profit. They just survive by taking on new, cheap debt to pay the interest on their old debt. When rates go up, they vaporize.
And a lot of jobs will vaporize with them.
Any job that's based on shuffling financial products or unnecessary layers of corporate bureaucracy or luxury consulting, those are nice-to-haves. In a crisis, society strips down to the must-haves.
Which is what you call the real economy.
Producers, fixers, and healers. It's that simple. If what you do creates a tangible good, repairs a critical piece of infrastructure, or provides a fundamental human need like food, health, or security, you are indispensable. Your skill becomes your currency.
Okay, so let's get really specific with advice. Let's talk to the veteran listener. Maybe someone who loses a lot of paper wealth but has a lifetime of experience.
The veteran's edge is not their 401k. It's their human capital. It's their network, their leadership skills, their social trust. They shouldn't try to become a mechanic overnight. Their role is to be the organizer. They can manage logistics for a community, set up security, mediate disputes. In a crisis, wisdom and trust are the scarcest resources. That's their new wealth.
Now, what about the fresher? Someone young, just starting out, no assets, but a lot of energy and time.
The fresher has a huge advantage. They need to immediately trade that time and energy for a high-utility, tangible skill. Forget the abstract university degree. Go become an apprentice to an electrician or a mechanic. Learn how to do something real with your hands that people will always need. Their goal is to get paid for their labor in hard assets, to completely bypass the dying currency.
So to give them and anyone else a clear path, let's list them. The top 5 collapse-proof skills. The new gold.
Number 1, without a doubt, is the healer. In any kind of societal breakdown, health becomes the number 1 priority. This means basic first aid, wound care, but also understanding sanitation, which is how you prevent disease. If you can keep people healthy, they will give you anything.
Number 2, the fixer.
Mechanical and electrical repair. The world will shift from consumption to preservation. New things will be expensive and rare. The person who can fix a generator, repair a water pump, or keep old communications gear running will be a king.
Number 3, the power grid.
This is all about local, off-grid energy and water. The centralized utilities are fragile. So knowing how to install solar panels, or even more critically, how to build a system that purifies contaminated water, you are providing the 2 most essential services for survival.
Number 4, the provider.
This is food, permaculture, local farming, and food preservation. If you can produce a surplus of food using sustainable methods and you know how to can it, cure it, or preserve it, you have created true, non-negotiable wealth. Food is the ultimate currency.
And finally, number 5, the organizer.
This comes back to what the veteran can do. Logistics, security, conflict resolution. A community can't survive in chaos and needs someone to manage how resources are shared, how security is maintained, and how disputes are settled fairly. This is the social glue.
So if we put all of that together, we can create a 0-to-1 plan for building well from nothing in a post-reset world.
It's a three-step strategy. First, in the immediate chaos, you trade your new labor skill not for money, but directly for tools. The tools of your trade. A medical kit, a set of wrenches, a water filter. Tools multiply your future earning power.
Step 2.
Once you have your tools and your skills, you stop accepting the dying fiat currency. You charge for your services only in hard assets, physical silver, or a direct transfer of Bitcoin.
And step 3.
You become so good, so essential as a healer, a fixer, a provider, that the system needs you more than you need its broken money. You achieve personal sovereignty through your utility.
It's a powerful framework. As we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear there's this tragic, repeating pattern through all of human history. We invent money to store our labor, and every single time, the people we put in charge of it end up corrupting it to steal that labor.
The reset that's coming, it's not the end of the world, but it is the end of the easy money world. It's a necessary cleansing fire. All the fake wealth that was built on debt and printing, it's going to be wiped out. And what will be left is real value, scarce assets, and tangible human skills.
The problem isn't money itself. The problem is that human integrity is not a scarce commodity. It seems we always cheat when given the power. So maybe the future requires systems like the physics of gold or the math of Bitcoin that are immune to our flaws.
So we'll leave you, the listener, with this one final thought to wrestle with. The question you need to be asking yourself is not, what will the dollar be worth in 5 years? The real question is, what is your labor worth when the scoreboard breaks?
If your entire existence is tied to a number in a bank account that someone else controls, you are profoundly vulnerable. The focus has to be on becoming so valuable to your community that you thrive no matter what currency they're using.
The time to learn one of these hard skills is now. Right now, while the knowledge is cheap and the lights are still on, become a fixer, a healer, a provider. The time to prepare is before the crisis, not during it.
Thank you for joining the deep dive.